All right. Hey, yeah, this is a special episode, and we have Danko with us. And if I really have to explain who he is, I shouldn't. But
You shouldn't.
Danny is the senior editor, right, of High Times?
Senior cultivation editor of High Times, yeah.
That is so dope, dude. And how long have you been with High Times?
A little over 17 years, actually. I started in 2002, and so I've been here almost 20 years now, between part-time and full-time, but full-time almost 18.
Oh,
Where
wow.
is here, man?
What's that?
Where is here? Where are you?
Well, I'm in the New York office. We have a New York office where we were for 43 of those years, and then a couple of years ago we opened a Los Angeles office, and so I have a lot of colleagues out there at the LA office as well. So this one is a smaller one than the LA one at this point. But this is here where we make the actual print magazine.
Right. Really?
Yeah.
How many people show up there just precariously, like, hey, I want to be part of High Times? Because honestly, that was me 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we get a lot of requests, mostly through social media and things like that. How do I get a job there? I always tell people, you start off by basically freelancing. If it's an editorial type of job, you want to basically send samples of your writing. If you're a photographer, send photos, that sort of thing. And if we end up using them, then we look to those people in the future when we actually do hire people. But the key is just to get your foot in the door. I mean, I started off here, answering the phone and breaking down boxes and things like that.
Wow.
Just because I knew I wanted to be a part of the brand. And little by little, sort of worked my way up into editorial position, and now it's going on 20 years. So, I just basically tell people. A lot of people think, oh, you work for High Times, you just get high all day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that have to happen. We put on events called the Cannabis Cup. We do parties. We make a magazine that comes out every month. We make best of issues that come out twice a year. We have a robust website and social media presence. So there's always something to do and always a lot going on at this office and in LA. So,
that's
I don't think
so. Like, what else do you have going on? Because you said there's always things going on. And before we went live in the green room, you were telling us about something that's going to be going on in Jamaica.
Right. Well, we partnered up with the Brightside Festival, which is doing an event in Jamaica this weekend, actually January 9th and through the 13th. So it's actually a 4-day event with the band Revolution and a bunch of other acts, reggae performers that are going to be performing at the resort. And they're actually all staying there as well. So it's kind of like this interactive way to hang out. But we have a High Times smoking lounge as part of the event there in Jamaica. So
is it legal down there?
It is. Yeah. It just a couple of years ago it went legal. So possession, things like that are legal. It's a little more murky depending on where the cannabis is coming from, but there are people growing a lot of stuff down there from the people who have been doing it for many years.
Yeah,
and
they
then
have to have like Jamaican landrace. I mean, they have to have something down there because that culture is thick.
Oh yeah. No, there's some strains up in those mountains that are, real sativa, electric,
You need to start flying that stuff back to Illinois for these craft growers so we can have some good Jamaica strains.
Well, a lot of it has to do with environment too. I mean, they have a perfect place to grow. That's why when I was down there last, they were talking about building indoor grows there. I said, you don't need to build anything indoors. You need greenhouses because you have perfect sun, perfect, soil and all of that. You just, your environment is the environment we're trying to recreate indoors, in Canada.
Well, what experience do you have on growing cannabis that you could lend to that?
Yeah, I mean, I have many years, even prior to working here, where I was cultivating basically for a living at that time, but now I'm doing a lot of traveling. I visit a lot of various size grows, from the smallest closet grow to these big 1 million square foot facilities that are popping up these days. So I've seen a lot and I've grown a lot, and I mean it's been a passion for well over 30 years of my life. So yeah, I'm just dedicated to the plant, dedicated to spreading the word. This is my book that came out last year. It's a beginner's guide to growing marijuana. It's called Cannabis, and it's really meant for people, entry level people, to just get growing themselves, because I really think a lot of people are worried about this corporate marijuana and it's all mids and what's going to happen to craft cannabis. And the way to keep that truly alive is just to do it yourself and have the genetics that you need to do it with, and become self-sufficient and not have to rely on dispensaries or legal
Do they have
outlets.
home grow in New York where you're at?
They do not yet, but we're working on it. I think, but this is the year 2020, I believe. I mean, we got really close to legalization in the last session, and at the last minute it got shelved. So we have a Democratic New York State Senate, which we haven't had for many years, and I do think they're committed to doing it. But I think they want to do it the right way. They want equity. They want to expunge all the criminal records. They want to be an example of the right way to do it.
Yeah. Well, over here in Illinois, we can export that law over to New York and show you. I mean,
yeah,
like,
congratulations.
Really,
that's right. You guys are in Chicago,
and,
right?
like, you can't get around the equity component because they made it in, because these applications that are everywhere that are competitive. So they're going to score the applications to see who wins the license. They injected that equity into that equation. So you can't really get around it. Mm-hmm. And they have to confront it head on. And so all these new companies that are forming put somebody in the social equity position where they get 51%. So, if New York needs any guidance on that, tell them to call me. I'll get the people that did the Illinois law in touch with them.
Well, New York also are, you guys are also working with that, the governors, that like 4 of them talking to Northwest Corner.
Right. New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. I think, once these states go, as well as Florida, then you're really talking about, the majority of the nation living in illegal states. And I think there's going to have to be a major federal change at that point.
Yeah.
And I think we're well on our way to that. It's clear. And so congratulations, you guys in Illinois. I mean, that's great. Is there home grow as part of that law?
Just for the medical patients. Okay, the medical patients got home grow, but like the first few days, and that's the real thing that you need to watch out for as you change these laws up there. Make sure that you anticipate that wave of demand that'll happen, so you allow the growers to start growing rec cannabis early enough so that by the time it becomes effective and they're open, they don't have all these shortages. I mean, I think the thing in Illinois, though, there's just not that many dispensaries. So they were essentially running at capacity as fast as they could ring the register. That's just as many cashiers that they had on staff. People would wait, like at dispensary 33, you'd wait in line to get a number, and then they would text you your number. And you wouldn't get texted. You'd get texted that the place is closing because it just couldn't get to you. And so that might still be going on. I don't know. Like my medical dispensary is usually closed on Mondays, and I haven't gone near a medical dispensary in the past week. I stocked up. I'm like, good luck, guys.
Yeah. But your shortage was kind of predictable because you guys don't even have the established like home grow culture that Washington up here. When medical, Danny, were you out here during medical times?
I was, yeah.
Yes, you've seen our markets. You walk in, you're like, holy shit! Everybody's just consuming and touching the plant in open jars, and it was this very organic thing that we had here. And then when they opened the shops, everybody's like, all right, because where does a weed come from when recreational happens? That's
it's called the stork.
Yeah, it magically appears, but I think we had enough.
Place babies come from. Just flies in.
Just happens.
Yeah.
Baby Jesus kisses it on and it appears.
Mm-hmm. And then magically you have a clone. Like that's the one thing that was cool. All these plants that I'm seeing growing in people's basements now really got pretty far in the past 6 days. I can't believe it.
Yeah. I mean, that's, where my passion lies, is in teaching people just how to grow better cannabis, how to improve the quality of it for themselves. Basically because I just like that, to see that high quality out there in the world. I mean, I'm a craft flower fan. So
I got my medical card here in Illinois, and that means that I can grow. What type? I want to get my tent and put everything together. I'm kind of busy and I'm always traveling to help people get into the industry. And so I was thinking about using autoflower seeds because I've never grown before, just for my first try, so I don't have to worry about it, having to trim it or like having lighting to go wrong. It'll just start flowering. What do you think about autoflowers?
Yeah, I mean, I think they serve a role, within cannabis genetics. They flower regardless of the photo period. So you just leave the lights on at 18 hours on, 6 hours off, and at a certain height, typically pretty small, they start flowering automatically. And they're not huge yielders typically, and sometimes a little bit of a milder THC level because of the ruderalis genetics that are bred into that, that cause that auto flowering. But I think that tremendous gains have been made in auto flowering. They have now auto flowering CBD rich, feminized seeds that are available, in bulk for people that are growing, these CBD plants. And autos, I think they play a major role, especially in places like, Canada, or places where people live at high altitude, where they just have a short season to grow within. And so they can actually end up getting 2 crops in the time that they would grow 1 crop using autos. And, there's something to be said for that, like, summertime sunshine, rather than like the fall is always like, it's a darker sun. There's more rain and humidity. So it's interesting that you can flower plants right in the middle of, June. Yeah. So, I think they play a role. It would be sad if all plants were autos. I think it's important that, that genetic diversity in cannabis is really important. We have a lot of polyhybridization going on, and, some of it is not, in the right direction, I would say. But I do think that, the more genetic diversity we have in cannabis, the better off for everyone, and for all the studies and things that are going to be happening once we have a federal legalization system, just to be able to, isolate all the different terpenes that are available in different strains. And
what do you think about the USDA getting involved? Because that's all. I mean, that's awesome, and I agree with it. But then they had these hemp strains, and these hemp strains were great. They were like a 20-to-1 CBD THC. But even that 1% of THC is going to be over the line for the total THC regulation that they have. And what's that going to do to genetics if you have to rely on CBG and other less terpene dominant strains?
Yeah, we're in a fuzzy time right now, because we're in between any kind of real regulations, and they're regulating in a way that's sort of ignorant, because 1% or 0.3% THC is not, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, obviously, we've seen that CBD with THC is more effective, with the entourage effect and all of that. So, I'm hoping that, that the regulations, that's really what's choking the industry in general. The legal industry is overregulation, overtaxing. So I think, we've erred on the side of caution, and now that they're seeing the results of that, I think it's time to amend those rules and regulate in a responsible manner, right, but without overdoing it, as far as things like, arbitrary THC levels, or arbitrary levels of nanograms of something in your blood system. Okay. We're at an infantile kind of stage of dealing with this healing flower. We're not. Yeah. They're still treating this like a drug, a narcotic.
Like heroin. Like literally, that's how they are regulating it on a federal level. It's heroin.
Yeah, no, even when they say treated like alcohol, it's millions of times safer than alcohol. So, it really should be treated like an herbal supplement, or any kind of simple remedy that you can grow for yourself in your yard. And so I'm it's baby steps to get to there, but I do think that eventually we will wind up with
I think so too. But hey, are you familiar with the 0.3% origin story for hemp?
I'm not sure why they landed on the 0.3.
It was literally arbitrary, and that's if you read so it's from 1976, and the United States has done such a good job of enforcing that copyright that you can only read it if you pay them $40 for JSTOR or some type of one of those periodical companies that publishes what do they call that? What all the teachers in college want to publish in, those types of journals. Mm-hmm. Journals. All right. So it was a journal article back in 76, this guy from Canada, and they just arbitrarily picked it. And they didn't use just the flowering female tops. They just kind of used the plant in general. Yeah. And then that arbitrary number became a legislative fact. which makes no sense. And then they want, I mean, that was the thing in the Safe Banking Act. They wanted to do a 2% threshold on cannabis THC levels. 2%.
Yeah.
If you want the Safe Banking Act, sure, but it's got to be 2%.
Danny, we talk about genetics all the time. You know, and home grow is the fight that we have here in Washington. Because one of the things that we point out is kind of like with the potato famine, you know, the lack of genetics because they only grew one potato over and over. And then, you know, people don't treat the plant because we're talking about the percentage of THC in hemp and the percentage of THC in marijuana, which is the same plant technically.
Right.
And can you explain more about, like, because we have this just a variety of people have the perception of, we take a plant, you take a seed, put it in the ground, you get a plant automatically, like it's a weed. People we call it a weed.
Yeah.
But there's also, like you were saying, perfect environments that we ask for, right? Like you're trying to do grow for the most part. Like no one in Wisconsin is going to be having an outdoor grow, at least, you know.
We have outdoor hemp. Well, there's outdoor hemp grows in Wisconsin.
You have a window like this big.
The autoflowers might do well up there. Yes.
Right. Right. Yeah, autoflowers would. But yeah, I mean, we've learned over and over that monoculture is not the way to go with, you know, wine grapes and, as you mentioned, the potatoes. So, you know, the genetic diversity is important in our medicine and in our food. And we've gotten away from that, you know, basically ever since World War II and everybody moving to the suburbs. They just tried to simplify this whole food thing. And that's why we rely on corn and soybeans to basically be everything in our, you know, grocery store. So I do think that there's a push, you know, back to preserving elite genetics or heirloom genetics and making sure that, you know, people have access to those things, especially as breeding material, because sometimes the strains themselves aren't maybe what we're used to, but their stability and their genetics in general, or something interesting about their terpene profile, can be passed to their, you know, progeny. And if those things are chosen properly by real breeders, you can really come up with something new. And, you know, for me, I love just trying different strains that taste differently. But the reason those things taste differently is because they also affect people differently and affect people's symptoms of diseases differently and problems that they might be diagnosed with. So again, genetic diversity is really important. I think, you know, it's vital, and it's now considered intellectual property.
Well, be careful. I mean, this plant is so bizarre because if you go over this line that it's an arbitrary line purely in the sand. On one side of that line, sure, you can get a plant patent on like lifter or some type of genetics of a cultivar for a high CBD strain that's under the THC line. But if you're over the THC line, like a cookie strain or something, no, you can't, because that's a federal crime, which is just ridiculous. It's the same plant. This way, it's an agricultural commodity. That way, it's heroin.
Yeah. It's strange times that we're in. But luckily, you know, I think they're changing in our favor. Like I said, when I started here in 2002, we were, you know, and even before that in the 90s, I mean, we were fighting a real uphill battle. And I think the wind is at our backs now. And certainly a lot of issues that we have to deal with when it comes to overregulation and overtaxation and all that. But
so change, and you mentioned, so like over at High Times, you guys have a new CEO, huh?
Absolutely.
So Stormy Simon, the former Overstock president, is now the CEO of High Times.
Yes, she is. And I want to welcome her to that role, because I know her from being at our events, and she's been on our board for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
And really, you know, built up Overstock from, you know, several $1 million company to a multi-billion-dollar company. So very excited to have her on board to lead us, you know, into this new future that we have. Lots of changes.
Distribution model. So what's the distribution model that you guys are going to start pivoting into?
You know, I'm in the editorial department, so I'm not really I'm not really sure about all of.
You're an art guy.
I'm not sure about all the business stuff that the deals that are being made, but I do know that there is a lot of stuff going on and deals being made. But you know, I'm a content creator, so I'm here just, you know, creating content, trying to you know, put out interesting things for people and improve the quality of their cannabis in general. Right. But I do think you know, we have a lot of very interesting prospects on the horizon
Yeah.
And they definitely want to be working closer with the plant and getting the plant to the people.
But she seems like someone that's more in tune with the culture too, which I think you guys kind of lost for a little bit. Like,
right.
when
she
you
is definitely
in
tune with the culture for sure. I think she'd be the first to say that cannabis improved her life. She might even say that it saved her life, but I do know that she's a true believer, and I think it's important in this industry. I think
that's one of the screening questions.
You don't even necessarily have to smoke, right? You don't even necessarily have to smoke, but you got to be a believer in that there's more to this than just money. The money, and there's nothing wrong with making money. I mean, we all want to survive and make money, but the underlying thing is that it's we're also helping people and freeing people of addictions, freeing people literally from prisons, and so to me that's really the important thing. For veterans
from
and seniors,
having to live in the shadows and check boxes and be at risk of always being fired. All those things you're freeing them from. So that's fantastic. And it's one of the screening things that I do first, because cannabis, from the side that I practice in, it's hard. It's like extremely complicated corporate law and business law with interplay of regulations. So you have to be good at dealing with the regulators themselves. And then there's all those layers of regulations all the way down to the local municipality. So you have to have the blessings from the zoning and those people so you can move in. Oh my gosh. And that's before you start downstreaming the LLCs to stack them so you can avoid IRC 280E. You say that to most lawyers and they're like,
you say it to most people, they're like,
right.
But then that's the whole thing, right? We're in a different realm now. It's like the lobbyists are new activists almost.
Well, and as Tom mentioned, it's all about compliance with regulations that are constantly changing and being revised and adapted, and metric this and there's that, and we're seeing a lot of the people who helped build all of this get left behind in certain places because they just can't afford or can't keep up with all the new ways you have to deal with jumping through all these hoops, so it is important to have people that are experts in legal matters, people that are experts in financial matters and all of that on your team, because you can't survive without it.
How well is that? Did you think that you'd be saying that like 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago? I mean, I need a staff.
No, I mean, I honestly, it's beyond my wildest dreams that we're at where we're at now, even though it still feels slow.
Gosh, I remember like when I met Miggy like 10 years ago, and I had published that book, and I was like, fresh out of college or whatever, a lawyer, and I'm like, I don't know, man, it might only be another 2 years. God, I was stupid.
Oh yeah. No, Keith Straub talks about saying, in the 70s, he's like, when everyone we know grows up, it's inevitable, but it didn't happen. Right. And there's powerful forces against it, but I think at this point we've kind of the toothpaste is out of the tube, and it's just a matter of time.
What I think they're trying to do. They're trying to smash that toothpaste right back into the tube with hemp, because hemp is now everywhere, and that hemp flower is great. I mean, so you could be smoking something that is enjoyable, that helps you with arthritis, that helps you with anxiety, that could maybe provide an alternative cigarette so you can get off of nicotine and tobacco. And it's organic, it's natural, it's got a wonderful terpene profile as well, and it's got no Delta-9 in it. Right. So you're not going to have to deal with that. Because, sometimes when you get too much Delta-9 THC, at least me anyway, especially with the edibles, I'll get a little paranoid and be like a little freaked out. And then you remind yourself, it's weed.
Right. Right. No, it is interesting to see those two things diverge so greatly. And also was, interested to know about cross-pollination between hemp and cannabis, because in some states it's legal to grow both. And in that pollen can travel a long way. It's lighter than air. It can travel miles. So I just wonder, about the difficulties of keeping the two things separate.
you know, in that situation, the only person that wins is the weed guy, because he's about to sell product with THC in it anyway. So he might just make it CBD product if he got pollinated, right? No?
Well, over time, I mean, first off, he's stuck with a crop full of seeds, which is always a bummer.
Unless you're going for seed, but
you're going for seed. But even then, you want to plan that. You don't want that to happen on accident. And so, and it's going to dilute that, cannabis genetic to a more of a hemp genetic. So it's interesting. I mean, it's all a lot better that we're discussing these sort of things than, it still being a full-on, war on marijuana with 50 states completely 100% illegal, which is where we were 20 plus years ago.
Even 10, there was no rec weed until about, who was the Washington State up there, right?
In
Colorado, I think right around 2010.
Well, that was medical. They started getting big in 2010. And then the rec started about 5 years ago, because I remember when the Seahawks were in the Super Bowl.
That was a big joke, right? Yeah. Denver and Seahawks. I mean,
it was Denver and the Seahawks. Yeah. Whatever that was. I think that was like 15 or something. That was like your first year. So, I mean, I got out of there and came back here, and it was now 5 years later, we have it in Illinois. So it seems like, that medical to rec, and they do it every time it goes somewhere else medical. They set up, they get their supply chains, and they're the first ones that's grandfathered into rec, and then they let everybody else in.
Right.
Well, not all of them grandfathered.
Right. That's true.
Well, too. Yeah, like how they did over in Washington.
No, Washington, they fucked everybody.
Plenty of places, places did close in Washington for sure. I mean, there was a huge turmoil over that rec law, and still is. I think it was divisive among the the community and the business people. But again, it's better than going to jail.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. We have to think back and remember that, for many years, this thing was underground. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't be about it the way we are now, and that's why it's so important for me that records
name on the stuff that I'd write like 10 years ago, and then I'd get told to stop promoting it when I got hired by a bank law firm. They're like, no, none of that shit.
Well, even the shittiest.
The Governor Pritzker in Illinois also that came along with 11,000 expunged records, which I think is important. I don't think people should have to apply to get their record expunged. I think this should be an automatic thing where they just clear your name. If it's not illegal anymore, get the people out of jail that are nonviolent marijuana offenders.
They did it interesting in Illinois in the sense that they created a new term of art called the minor cannabis offense. And so there's auto expungement, and then there's expungement that you'd actually have to file like a paperwork with. And so the auto expungement is if you are arrested for an ounce or less, gone. And then again, there's possession limits, which I think is bizarre in this form of legalization. It's just it's more liberal than it was 10 years ago, but it's still not alcohol. It's not like Everclear that you can go buy at the drugstore or the grocery store.
Well, yeah, and anytime they place any kind of limit, saying, "Oh, well, and less than an ounce is this, and more than an ounce is that." I mean, where do they think those ounces come from? Those ounces come from pounds, and those pounds come from larger packs. And I mean, why is a small amount legal and a larger amount illegal? None of that ever made sense to me. But I did understand, you're making baby steps. So first you decriminalize the ounce, and then, you keep going. You just keep pushing the envelope. But you got to get somewhere. And so I understand politics. It's the art of the possible, what's possible. And you just keep plugging away, because now that they see the money and they see that, the society is not falling apart, then even the people who weren't on board are on board. So, you get further and further away.
I think medical does that for the states. Like when a state gets medical, it's not so much they set up this pre-industry. It's more like they break down the pre-ignorance, where people are like, oh, okay, my cousin or my aunt goes to the dispensary and gets
right. Well, I like how Russ Belville used to say, it's medical is getting the wounded off the battlefield. The war continues, but you got to get the wounded people off the battlefield and let them be, and then keep fighting the war. So to me, that's kind of like the metaphor of medical.
Yeah, but then in Illinois, the medical became to a certain extent a battlefield, because it was an exceedingly restrictive initial list, and then the purchasing of the cannabis is not fun. I mean, it's bad. Like, you can't smell it, you can't see it, you can't it's all pre-wrapped, everything like that. And now that they've opened that up more, sure, it's easier to get your card. But for the first few years, I mean, it wasn't. And so that's all these people got into this industry in Illinois thinking that they were going to be able to make money. And then they just got bled for forever. And then who really hurt was the patients, because there was no home grow. So you go and you're buying medicine at $60 an eighth.
Right. I mean, one thing that I've noticed, in legalization, especially in the cultivation world, is the bigger you grow, the harder it is to maintain quality. And all these places are 40,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet. They're just these massive places, and you can't create the same product that you can grow in a 4x4 tent. It's just you're not gonna have as much attention to place on each individual plant. And if they give you plant limits, right, like 6 plants, 12 plants, the size of the plant is not limited. It's only the amount of plants. So you can vegetate those plants for longer. You can grow bigger plants. I mean, you can grow one plant, under a whole 1,000-watt light if you want, and veg it for 2 months and get a huge.
You just have to, in Illinois, you just have to make sure it's in an enclosed locked room that you can't see from the street, and keep it locked so that no kids can go in there and be like, look at that plant.
Yeah. Right. Andy, what's your ideal craft grow size? Like if you were to do the Danny Danko grow?
I mean, I think if it's for personal use only, I would just do a tent, 4x4 or an 8x4, 8x8 maybe, if I was feeling, like I had the space and wanted to do it that big. But really for like a private, person to create enough cannabis for themselves, assuming they smoke, maybe a quarter ounce or so a week, which is pretty.
That's a lot.
A decent amount.
That's bogarting joints. It's just
right,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, and also with like I said, with even plenty to give away if you're feeling generous, which I think people should give it away if they have it to give. So even a 4x4 tent, with 6 plants, growing, a quarter pound per plant every 3 months, that's a pretty decent haul out of a tiny 4x4 space without really running a ton of electricity or having to really worry about the bill being too high or not being able to control the environment as easily, because the fans, the lights, it's all built into those tents, and I mean, I think, like I said, like a 4x4 or an 8x8, not much larger than that personally, just because at that point, like I said, quality suffers, and I don't, nor do I need that much in my life if I'm not like getting paid to grow it, or smoking ounces and ounces every day, or making it into oil, or one of the many other things that can be done. But again, the bigger you grow, the more quality suffers, and I've seen plenty of big grows that are decent quality, but none I would rate as A+
craft kind of quality.
Craft. Right.
Well, that's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out in Illinois with the limitations, because it's 5,000 square foot flowering, and that creates some confusion because the regulation is not uniform across the United States. So some people are more used to managing grows and numbers of plants. So like, well, how many plants is that? 1,500? Yeah, it's about 1,500. And then it depends on how the license is there, but you're allowed to, they did publish the emergency rules. We haven't seen the final rules. The rules will tell you how you can take a craft grow from 5,000 square foot up to 14,000. And 14,000, that's a pretty big operation. I'm not sure if that's going to be something that is going to start bumping up against where you think the quality suffers.
Right. I mean, I think so. I think every sort of incremental move you make to go to scale up will cause a certain amount of quality to suffer. But I've seen, like I said, I've seen 875,000 square foot spaces.
Wow.
I think the more successful places are the ones that compartmentalize. They'll do 1,000 or 2,000, in a room separated, so that if there's a problem, it's isolated, and rather than the big kind of open floor situation where, again, pests, infestations can spread. Any kind of deficiencies are really can be quite an issue. And it also depends on what that product is being grown for. I mean, most of that stuff I think is probably blasted into CO2 oil for vape pens, or into dabs, or isolate or distillate that's being put into edibles. I mean, there's so many different reasons that people grow now, and I think the craft flower seems to just be part of a much larger market. You know?
Yeah, I didn't think about
But
that.
it's the one I love. So
I like to get snobby about it. I'm like, oh no, like Miggy will be like, hey, I got a pre-roll. I'm like, ew, I got to grind it fresh. I'm sorry that you could tell that it's pre-rolled.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I like to smoke, but you know, the best if I can. But I'm not snobby in the way that like, hey, if this is what's around, I'm smoking
right,
it.
of course.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, like
You
you're
know,
saying though, like the weed, the shittiest weed today I can buy in the recreational market is still way better than the gasoline smuggled weed that was from Mexico.
Years
no,
ago,
I
yeah.
mean, God, I don't even want to look back at those days and think about what, you know, I sometimes flip through some of these old high times and you can see the pictures, you know, from the 70s and 80s of what
was good,
what they thought was like centerfold worthy. And we are very privileged to live in the time that we do with the quality that we have available, even, you know, even with all the issues that we deal with.
Tell me about like extracts coming onto the scene, because I don't really I don't recall extracts outside of like hash at all 20 years ago, and I didn't see hash until I was in Europe like 15 years ago. And then now in the past 10 years, all these different extracts have come to the fore. And I mean, I remember when I got my first vape pen was like in Colorado in 2016 or 17. And then I got one in Illinois as a medical patient. I'm like, they haven't figured it out yet. You know, so that's real reason. When did you start noticing it coming on? Because you've been in high times for 20 years. Right.
I mean, like you said, that the concentrates have changed like crazy. When I started, we would go to Amsterdam and smoke imports, Afghani hash, Moroccan for the most part, Lebanese, all places that have, you know, thousands of years old traditions of hash making, but, you know, fairly crude traditions where lots and lots of plants are basically just sifted and then that's pressed and you know, that's their method of concentration. Now we have people using solvents and butane, hexane, and all these different and carbon dioxide and stripping just the essential oil from the plant, and they're able to make, you know, like we mentioned, isolates, distillates, the dabs that people smoke in
when did you first see dabbing? All right, let's play. I mean, when did dabbing come onto the scene?
Even hash oil. I mean, if you really look into it, there was hash oil in the 60s and 70s that was a crude kind of iso alcohol formulations that they would have, and people would dip cigarettes into this hash oil. I can remember from the 80s for sure, but it was again like fairly crudely put together, and I think that the sophistication of the process, although it's a dangerous process if you're using you know, solvents for sure, but there's methods of ice water extraction. I think rosin pressing is amazing because
where did that come from? It's like, oh yeah, get that hair straightener and a piece of parchment and a dank nugget.
The quality of the flower, I think, had a lot to do with it too, because, you know, if you're looking at a flower that's, you know, produces a lot of essential oil, you can press it and squeeze that oil out. But if you tried to do that with some of that Mexican or Jamaican stuff we would get back then, nothing would come out. So, you know, the process itself needed the quality to improve before it sort of refined itself. And now, you know, people are doing solventless extracts that are incredible. And we have a category for that in our cannabis cups. And literally every couple of months, there's, you know, a higher quality non-solvent hash being entered into those events, and just people just
micron bags that they'll use to to make it with the ice water. So Illinois, High Times, Cannabis Cup, when's that happening?
Well, we're putting a bunch of them on the map for 2020. This is the year that 420 is a whole month long. So you know, we're going to be announcing a bunch of them in the very near future, because I know there's a few that are already set in stone, and then there's a bunch that we're working on to put together, and brand new ones. I know, you know, Illinois is on the map. I know, you know, we're hoping to do more East Coast events, Massachusetts, hopefully, and a bunch of others. So, you know, stay tuned. Keep checking cannabiscup.com. You know, all of our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we put all of our stuff out there. And yeah, we're very excited about it. And there's a 420 every month also. So there's 420 month in April. And then just a couple of days ago, we had, you know,
January 1st,
1 420, 2 420.
420. Yeah. So it's a big year. I think we're going to make a lot of political progress. I think we're going to get a lot of progress towards expunging those records and releasing those prisoners, because I think that really is ultimately the most important part of all this. We can't be out here simply just making money and forget about the people that are locked up. And then also social use, just people getting together and enjoying.
It's not legal until it's 100 feet from a school, just like the bars, because that's the thing. Like, I look at my city's ability to regulate, and Peoria, Illinois is replete in alcohol history. It's been there. I mean, like, we used to get the whole country drunk. And so they have like 20 different methods of liquor licenses. So for like, if I'm going to have a concert or something, I can have the beer vendors on there. How come at the concert at Lollapalooza, we can't have the Cresco stage where they're handing out there? That's a pre-roll. That's when I would use a pre-roll, because it's the convenience.
Right.
So how come that's not there yet? And Illinois started to create some type of social use, and they quickly walked it back when they're in their trailer bill. So they put it out there, and it was really, really nebulous. You're like, holy crap, are they going to allow like this or that? No.
Right. No. Yeah. I mean, that's the difficult part. The next frontier of activism that we have to do is fight for the right to grow your own, because some of these producers don't want to compete with home growers, which
wasn't
is
that
crazy.
MedMen that they were making fun of? Yeah, on South Park. Yeah,
integrity. Yeah,
integrity. We
don't have integrity.
So I think it's those three things. It's expunging the records and releasing the prisoners first and foremost. Fighting for the right to be able to grow our own, even if there's plant limits or whatever that might be, and social use, being able to get together and sharing this wonderful healing flower plant, not
right.
And I think places like Las Vegas and Denver to a certain extent are going to pioneer that, particularly Las Vegas and Nevada, because there's a lot of pressure there. As far as tourists can come, they can buy flour, they can buy pre-rolls, they can buy.
Do they have half limits? Edibles. Do they have out-of-state limits?
I believe there is limits on what you can buy in each particular visit to a dispensary, but there's nowhere to consume the product. I mean, you're not supposed to smoke in your hotel. You're not supposed to smoke on the street. You can get a $600 ticket if the police catch you on the strip smoking.
$600 ticket.
Oh yeah. So something has to give. We need places like we did a Cannabis Cup event recently in December in Las Vegas, and we had a consumption lounge on the property because it was on Paiute land. It was on Native American territory.
Okay.
And they created their own. They have a space called Nuwu, which is incredible. This massive, huge dispensary, and there's a smoking lounge in the dispensary.
Oh my God!
Yeah, you can actually go and do dabs and smoke joints right there within the dispensary, and they have all the air purifying equipment. You can't even smell anything when you walk into the dispensary.
What's the deal with that? I like the way weed smells. Some people hate it.
Well, there's also issues of employees that might be working at, the casino or wherever you might be.
Oh, they're worried about secondhand.
They're worried about contact high or
contact high. Kind of like how, like, when you throw a drink at somebody's like, "Oh no, I've got alcohol on me." Yeah.
So, the social issue is a funny one too, because Danny, I don't know if you remember at the High Times here in Everett, they call it the Seattle Cup, but it was actually an hour north of us.
Right. I do remember it.
But it was a wonderful event, in my opinion, because you had the main Coliseum where everything was going on, and then across the street was a consumption area. They didn't want any consumption on the Coliseum area, so High Times made a spot across the street. Dabbing was going on and smoking joints, and even like there was a concert, guys were throwing joints off a stage. Nobody died that whole weekend. Nothing bad happened. It was a fucking wonderful weekend. And yet the city of Everett got a fucking bug up its butt and said no more cups. The social consumption thing's still a hard thing to prove when you say, look, nothing bad has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to hundreds and hundreds. I've been to all of our Cannabis Cups for all the years going back to Amsterdam, and I mean, not all, but I mean, I've been to a lot of those, all the ones we've done in the U.S. And there's never, I mean, people are more polite than you can imagine, just bumping into each other. Sorry, excuse me, pardon me. Yeah. It's really like there's no even need for much security or anything, because people are just really chill. They're happy to be in an environment where they can consume cannabis or purchase it or whatever it might be. And I do think that, that's one of the things we do is we send that message to the world. That's like, hey, we're not a threat to your society.
Yeah.
If anything,
I'm kind of plugged into the thing, and I didn't get to see it until I was firsthand when I visited Miggy over the last summer in August for the Hemp Fest, and you just see everybody smoking weed by the Puget Sound, if that's how it's pronounced, and everybody's fine, and they just get up and leave. It's like, well, that was. And then meanwhile, there's somewhere out there's like an Oktoberfest going on where people are just drunk and getting into fights and peeing on the sides of buildings. And that's fine. That's fine. Right.
Every sporting event I've been to has had some kind of, melee or something go on. And people bring their kids there. I just think, we've had this stigma placed upon us for so long and had to live with, this kind of internalized shame that people make us feel for being cannabis consumers. And I mean, that's changing, but there's plenty of that still exists. And
last year well, I don't know when Jeff Sessions got bounced. It might have been the year before last, but it was recently when Jeff Sessions, he put out a memo that essentially undid all the memos from the Obama administration, and then he got sacked. But before that, he said that good people don't smoke marijuana, and now he's gone, and that memo essentially meant nothing. But at the same time, they tried. And they're doing it right now with the Safe Banking Act, just picking it apart. 2% THC. I'm fine with that if it's Delta 9, because most high quality flowers, Delta 9 levels will still be under it, but their THCA might be in 25, 30. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's counterintuitive to try to you're limiting the psychoactive effect, but you're also limiting the medicinal effect. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's the world we're in right now. It's our job to educate people and let them know, even if they're not consumers, that we're not an issue with for their system. We're not going to tear down society or anything like that. And B, that we're among them. We're everyone, and we need our right to consume this plant in peace. That's really all we want. I just don't want to be fined. I don't want to go to jail. I want to have my plants in my house and smoke where you say I can, but you got to say somewhere.
That's right. I mean, because think about it.
Nowhere. It can't be nowhere. And, and the social aspect of cannabis is that you want to share it. You want to pass a joint. You want to, and think about, veterans that, don't want to be out in crowds. I meet a lot of people where, these cannabis events are the only place they really truly feel safe and feel like they can express themselves and be friendly, because whether they be seniors that don't necessarily have a lot of other like-minded friends around them, and then they finally show up and they see people from all walks of life and all races and genders and all of it all together enjoying cannabis. I mean, it brings tears to their eyes that there's this community, and you can't have a community without places for people to get together. So those are the things I'm still fighting for: the prisoners, the grow your own, and the social use. And and there's some states that that have no medical. Like Idaho or somewhere where they're still living in the same world we were 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 10, and they're patients, but they have no access and no legal access. And I mean, that's all got to change. And, it is changing, but not nearly fast enough. In places like Tennessee, for instance, or, Texas, or wherever it might be, you can still get a life sentence for cannabis cultivation. And one state away, you could be a millionaire. None of it makes sense. And I do think, it's changing in the right direction, but it's happening slow but steady.
Well, like you said, it seemed like
2020 is going to be big.
We're so far ahead, and it just seems slow, but it's not slow, right?
Well, it depends on where you are. There's people in Singapore right now that it's pretty slow for them. They're on death row for cannabis or hash, and so that we weigh all of our progress and gains against all of the things we haven't yet achieved. And
I don't know, it's a grind, and it'll wear on you, but that stigma is going away. It's still just totally there. And then some people, when they do have that stigma, they just might be quiet. But that's fine. You know, your silence is better than arresting me. I know that you don't approve and you think that it stinks and that I'm a bad person. But, you know, thanks for not like dehumanizing me and putting me into central booking or something. You know,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, I live in New York City. There's lots of things I see that I don't approve of pretty much every day.
That's right.
But I have to deal with them because they're a part of, you know, someone else's life. And so I let people, it's live and let live. We're not out here looking to harm anyone. We're not out here looking to get your kids high. You know what I mean? We're not out here. If anything, we want to be regulated. We want to be taxed. You know, we don't want to get thrown in jail. So ultimately, you know, it's the stigma's there, but hopefully going away. And you know, we as advocates, that's our job. You know, to keep removing it as much as possible, or at least make sure that people who feel that way aren't empowered to act on those feelings.
Exactly.
That's right. I mean, like that, and it's going to be doing this for another 10 years easily.
Oh yeah,
easily.
Yeah. It's a long fight. You know, it's like it's not like alcohol prohibition. They just, you know, snapped a finger and it was over. It really is, you know, state by state, county by county. You know, there's places opting out of cannabis businesses that are going to then see, you know, the county next door making tons of money off of it. And we're you know, in that weird in between time.
For sure.
Well, it just goes to show that people can have the answer given to them, explained to them, shown to them again, shown to them every week on a weekly basis, and still be like, nah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nah. It's a particularly American kind of thing that I've noticed.
I don't need to believe that.
So, Danny, you got a podcast?
In the face of all evidence,
yeah,
I still feel the way I feel.
That's right.
In the face of overwhelming evidence against any of that, it's just how I feel. Sorry.
Fuck. We've been enough to put somebody in jail for. That's fucked up, though.
So, man, how do we find you, Danny?
Yeah, well, on Instagram, I'm Danny Danko HT. The book is on Amazon and available through all my social media. On Facebook, it's Danny Danko. On Twitter, I'm actually verified on Twitter. The one place where I have the little blue check on Twitter is also Danny Danko. So I do Twitter for, like, you know, my news stuff. I do Facebook for you know, promotion of high time stuff that's going on or things in my life, and Instagram for, you know, photos and also promotion of high times events and things, different various you know, Seattle Hemp Fest if I'm going to be there, or Boston Freedom Rally, or any of the different things. So
yeah, well, this guy wants a Peoria, Illinois Cannabis Cup. I just don't think that's going to be the draw that Chicago would, to be honest.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, look, it's all about finding a venue. The toughest part is, you know, finding partners that are willing to, you know, push the envelope with us, because, you know, we want to stay compliant. We want to be within the regulations of whatever that place is, but we also want to throw the party we want to throw, which does involve, you know, consumption when we can do it, and which does involve, you know, people having booths where you can learn about, you know, CBD if you want to learn about that. You can learn about THC. You can buy seeds. You can buy grow equipment. You can get T-shirts and, you know, all the things that represent the cannabis world and culture.
Yeah, the way that they walked back social consumption. I mean, the way that they had it initially, I'm like, yeah, no problem. We'll just get that blessed over there from this, you know, municipality. If they want to do it, they can do it. They might charge you $20,000 for the permit or something, but they had the right to do it. Now they've walked that back. So it's basically just the dispensary, which of course is like Fort Knox. You know, if you ever bought legal weed in Illinois, it's kind of like buying weed out of Fort Knox. As opposed to having a venue where you could have booths and things and a stage and stuff set up. And then the other place is tobacco retailers, which, again, same thing. It'd be like at a cigar lounge. You really don't have the space that you would want, you know, which stinks. But hopefully another legislative amendment, and they'll walk that back and allow more regulation so that they could have, like, a dispensary might need the license to have the right to sell somewhere else, but one step at a time, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the meantime, you know, there's a perfectly wonderful model out of Spain where they just set up these private social clubs, and you opt in as a member to be in the part of the club. And then once you're a member, you can go there, you can, you know, consume, you can share. Some of them you can buy, and there's even, you know, some of them you can have a beer or a snack or whatever. So it's kind of like the
well, social clubs will be big in Chicago. Like anything that's exclusive, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you have to know the special knock and also be invited, and then you have to be a member of the club.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was places existing like that. As
well, there will be after
after
this video is over. People are gonna be like, "Hey, Mort, did you hear that? Yeah, that's right. We're making a club." Yeah,
right. I mean, we have people here in New York taking buses up to Massachusetts just to buy legal cannabis and bring it right back. And so, you know, businesses pop up, you know, from the underground.
What about speaking of the business with the law enforcement end? So if I was going to, you know, organize a Milwaukee to Chicago weed run and bust them in, bust them out. So like the cops just waiting for traffic to come back from Illinois. It's like, there's the weed bus. Get them.
Yeah. Again, you know, we're still figuring out the margins of how far the envelope can be pushed.
Right.
And, you know, there's different people willing to go out there and do that. And I don't know exactly, you know, where the line is, and it's not my, you know, my lane, but I do appreciate having come from the underground. I do appreciate, you know, that culture, and I hope that it does, you know, remain part of the cannabis world. I think that's where the best growers are. I think that's where the most knowledgeable, you know, healers are. And, you know, we've seen that time and time again. That's, you know, and the legal, they deserve a place at the table.
They absolutely deserve a place at the table. And Danny, thanks so much for coming on. And like and subscribe. We'll have more people from the industry and cannabis legalization news.
Dude, thank you.